I am Celeste, 30 years old, and until recently, I was simply trying to start over. After the divorce, I sold the condo in Miami, boxed up 10 years of shared memories, and moved into a modest apartment near Central Park. I told myself it was a fresh start, smaller space, quieter life, less to lose. What they didn't know, what even I hadn't fully realized, was that beneath the polite smiles and RSVP emails, something far darker had been brewing. And it was about to spill all over the white linen tablecloths of a penthouse that was never truly ours. If you've ever second-guessed your own family's kindness, stay with me. My parents, Corinne and Malcolm, were the kind of people strangers trusted immediately. Elegant, articulate, always arriving with a bottle of red wine and a story that made the room lean in closer. To their friends, they were a power couple, Corinne with her string of pearls and impeccable taste in real estate, Malcolm with his silver temples and financial savvy. To me, they were complicated. Growing up, I learned to be the steady one. I followed rules. I wore navy blue while my sister Sabrina danced through life in sequins. Sabrina, 3 years older, was always the gifted one. She had a laugh that made adults chuckle and a smile that made them open checkbooks. At school events, Sabrina got flowers. I got nods. When Sabrina failed her freshman year of college, our parents blamed the university for not understanding creative minds. When I graduated with honors, they skipped the ceremony for a charity gala. You understand, don't you, sweetheart? The Andersons are matching donations tonight. Zora, I understood. I always understood. There were moments when I let myself believe they saw me. Like when I moved back to Manhattan after the divorce, and they offered their guest suite while I apartment hunted. Corinne even arranged for a private showing of a newly renovated co-op. You need beauty around you, darling. Trauma feeds on beige walls. I declined, of course. I needed space more than marble countertops. But I didn't pull away entirely. When Malcolm needed a bridge loan for a short-term liquidity issue, his words, not mine. I quietly wired $40,000 from my divorce settlement into a shell account Harper set up. They never asked where it came from. They just said, we knew you'd come through. And when Sabrina needed help with legal fees after that unfortunate incident with her crypto project, I transferred another $20,000 without a word. She sent a text, THX, sis sir, the best. That was it. Still, I told myself family is family. Then came the invitation. A gold-trimmed envelope arrived one Friday afternoon, hand-delivered by courier. Inside, a single card with calligraphy so elaborate it took me a moment to read it. Celebration of Vision Penthouse launch and family partnership agreement signing. Beneath it, in Corinne's familiar cursive, your future begins here. Cocktail attire, papers to be signed on site. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb ran over the embossed initials M&C Real Estate Holdings. A week earlier, they'd pitched the project over dinner at Carbone. A luxury penthouse renovation project, they said. Prime Soho location. Early investor opportunities, family only. Limited shares, guaranteed equity return. They made it sound like legacy. You'll be part of something permanent, Malcolm said, swirling his wine. Not just for you, but for your children someday. I didn't have children. I wasn't sure I wanted any. But I nodded. Corinne reached across the table, her rings glinting. Celeste, darling, don't overthink this. You've always been cautious to a fault. Let this be your yes. And I almost did. That night I called Harper. Harper wasn't just my lawyer. She'd been with me through the divorce, through the ugly property settlements, through the unread emails from Alan's new fiancé. She had a voice like granite and a memory like a steel trap. I need you to review something, I said. It's a real estate investment, family. Might be legit. There was a pause. Send me everything. Tonight. I did. Floor plans, projected returns, the LLC breakdown. Everything they gave me. The next morning, Harper texted one sentence. Delay signing. Something doesn't smell right. But I didn't delay. I ironed my dress, tucked the cashier's check $50,000 into my clutch, and got into a rideshare bound for a building I'd only seen in renderings. The champagne flutes were already chilled when I arrived. And as I stepped into that penthouse, greeted with kisses and curated music and the smell of peonies, I felt for the briefest moment that maybe I belonged here. What I didn't know was that while I smiled politely and made small talk with investors I'd never met, Harper was staring at a document that would dismantle the entire illusion. A single screenshot, a missing name, a legal ownership trail that ended in a post office box in the Cayman Islands, and a message waiting on my phone I hadn't seen yet. Do not sign. Call me now. I didn't see Harper's message until just before dessert. The penthouse was candlelit filled with the kind of people who used the word portfolio as a verb. Waiters floated past with truffle hors d'oeuvres and flutes of Dom Perignon. Somewhere near the marble fireplace, Malcolm held court with a man from Connecticut who wore a lapel pin shaped like a falcon. Sabrina was perched near the grand piano laughing too hard at something an older hedge fund manager had said. I stood by the window, gazing down at the shimmering Manhattan skyline, trying not to clutch my purse too tightly. Inside it, that cashier's check waited. $50,000, my entire safety net. Then my phone buzzed. One new message from Harper: do not sign. Call me now. I stepped into the guest bathroom, locked the door, and hit call. Celeste Harper answered before the second ring. Her voice was lower than usual. Serious. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Okay, I whispered, already bracing. The LLC they want you to invest in, it's not clean. The ownership is buried in a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. But more importantly, Corinne and Malcolm are not legally tied to it in any enforceable way. I blinked. What does that mean? It means you're not buying into their project. You're wiring money to a black hole. There's no paper trail that connects this investment to real property ownership. The penthouse is rented month to month from another entity. I sank onto the closed toilet lid. My throat dried instantly. But they took me to a showing. I saw the property. The signed plan, the ownership shares. They gave you polished documents with real estate graphics. That doesn't make it legal. They've used this structure before in Florida and Oregon under different names. I pulled cases. They weren't convicted, but they've settled multiple civil lawsuits. Quietly, I felt the air thin around me. Harper's voice softened. Celeste, this is what they do. They create just enough legitimacy to trap people who trust them. And I had trusted them. With everything. I hung up and stared at my reflection. The woman in the mirror didn't look like a mark. She looked like someone who kept track of her receipts, who used sunscreen, who showed up to work on time. But trust makes fools of careful people too. When I emerged from the bathroom, Malcolm spotted me immediately. There's our star, he said, raising a glass. Are we ready? The room hushed slightly as he gestured to a velvet-lined folder on the long dining table. Let's make this official. I walked over, heartbeat suddenly thunderous. Corinne placed a fountain pen beside the papers. Just sign here, darling. Then we toast. I opened the folder. Legalese block font, pretty signatures at the bottom. But no mention of my name in any clause with ownership weight. No escrow, no safety net. I looked up. Who owns the title? I asked softly. A flicker. That's all it took. Malcolm's eyes shifted just a beat too fast. The entity listed, darling, Corinne answered smoothly. It's all protected. That's how investments work. But who controls the entity? Another beat. That's not relevant right now, Malcolm said. My fingers curled into fists. Yes. It Island. I turned to the nearest guest, a woman with sharp shoulders and a sharper jawline. Did you already invest? She hesitated. Not yet. I'm reviewing the terms again. I nodded. You should. Carefully. Then I raised my phone, tapped the screen, and held up the document Harper sent. This is the title report. The penthouse is registered under an offshore holding group. Not under this LLC. Not under my parents' names. And certainly not under any structure that guarantees your investment. A hush swept the room. Malcolm stepped forward. Celeste. This is unnecessary. No, I said, loud and clear. What's unnecessary is dragging friends and family into a shell game. Corinne's voice dropped cold and cutting. You're embarrassing yourself. I turned to her. No, mother. I'm exposing you. The guests murmured. Some stepped back. A man with a folded pocket square discreetly picked up his glass and moved toward the elevator. And then it happened. Corinne leaned in, her voice like glass. You should be grateful, she hissed. We even offered you a seat at the table. This world, it was never built for people like you. You're not an heir, you're a placeholder. I stared at her, stunned by the clarity of cruelty in her voice. I may not be an heir, I said slowly, but I sure as hell won't be a pawn. I turned to the guests once more. If any of you are considering investing, ask for proof, title ownership, escrow structure, disclosure filings, and when they can't give it to you, walk. And then I walked straight out the door. Back on the street, the cold air slapped my face like a baptism. I didn't have a car waiting. I didn't need one. I walked, heels clicking against pavement, heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Behind me, the penthouse lights burn like a stage set just before the curtains fall. And I knew without question this story wasn't over. Not even close. 3 days passed before I heard from them again. I ignored Corinne's emails. The subject lines ranged from cold "let's be civil" to threatening consequences of your outburst. Malcolm sent a text once, "We need to speak privately." I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself not to scream. Instead, I called Harper. We met at a quiet cafe in Brooklyn. No marble countertops or curated playlists, just chipped mugs and creaky floors. It felt honest. "I ran more checks," Harper said, sliding a folder across the table. "I wasn't going to overwhelm you at the party." Inside were screenshots, filing documents, and a spreadsheet I couldn't fully decipher. Harper tapped one line. "This shell company. They've used variations of it at least 6 times. Always in different states. Always with just enough variation to dodge scrutiny." She flipped to a photocopy of a court transcript. "See here, a civil suit in Phoenix. A teacher lost her retirement after investing in a family-run hotel venture that never broke ground. Sound familiar?" It did. Harper continued. "No criminal convictions yet. They settle quickly. Confidential agreements. Sometimes they refund partial money to make it go away." I stared at the page, heart sinking. "And now they're doing it to me." Harper nodded. "And probably to others." That afternoon, I started looking closer. The penthouse guests, they weren't strangers, they were targets. Sabrina's ex-boyfriend, a tech consultant flush with post-acquisition cash. Aunt Julia's college roommate who just retired. A friend from church who sold her upstate home for something new. I made calls, carefully worded. Most had already invested. Small amounts, 20, 30,000, but enough to matter. Enough to hurt. Some were starting to get uneasy. "The documents feel vague," one said. "They said the notary was delayed." Another whispered, "Do you think this is a scam?" I didn't say yes. I didn't need to. The next twist came quietly. Harper emailed me a short video clip pulled from a surveillance camera in a storage facility in Jersey City. Someone had tipped her off. No sound, grainy footage, but unmistakable. It showed Malcolm removing boxes labeled Holdings 2016. He glanced around, opened one, pulled out papers, and tossed them into a burn barrel out back. Corinne stood beside him, lighting a match. Harper captioned it. This was after the Portland project collapsed. I felt nauseous. They weren't just mismanaging funds. They were erasing history. That night, I pulled out an old album, photos from childhood. Disneyland beach vacations, birthdays I barely remembered. In every picture, Corinne's smile was perfect. Malcolm's arm rested gently on someone's shoulder. They looked like parents. They weren't. The following weekend, Harper invited me to a gathering, quiet, cautious. 5 others had come forward, mostly women, mostly middle-aged. All had been approached by Corinne or Malcolm over the past decade. One woman wept quietly as she shared how she'd invested her late husband's life insurance into a beachfront condo that never existed. Another had co-signed a loan to help Corinne secure a bridge buyout. She'd been paying for it ever since. I listened, heart heavy but steadier. These weren't fools. They were loyal, hopeful, the kind of people who still believed in second chances. Corinne and Malcolm hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen trust. Meanwhile, the house of cards was wobbling. Sabrina posted a filtered selfie on social media, champagne in hand, captioned, "Some people are just jealous of success." I clicked on the comments. Dozens. Questions. Accusations. Links. Somebody had leaked screenshots from the investment contract. Red lines highlighted inconsistencies. Someone else had posted the title report from Harper. The comment that hit me hardest. It's always the ones who pretend to be family-oriented that end up gutting you. The internet was watching. I got one final message from Corinne. A voicemail less than 30 seconds. "I hope you're satisfied. Whatever happens now, it's on your hands. Family doesn't betray family, Celeste. Not unless they want to be alone forever." I played it twice. Then I deleted it. Alone didn't scare me anymore. Buying blind did. The plan wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. The truth I had learned didn't require drama, just a well-lit room and a quiet voice. Harper and I coordinated everything down to the hour. A public venue, neutral ground. A former gallery turned co-working space downtown offered just enough space and just enough silence. We invited the investors, not everyone, just those who had written checks, signed preliminary papers, or hesitated on the edge of commitment. And we invited Malcolm and Corinne. Under the pretense of a status update. They accepted. I wasn't sure if they were arrogant or just predictable. The room smelled like varnished wood and paper. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows. The table was set with water glasses and printed packets. They arrived late. Corinne swept in first silk scarf looped like armor. Malcolm followed pinstriped composed. He smiled thinly. Quite the crowd. Corinne scanned the room, eyes narrowing when she spotted Harper. What is she doing here? Harper didn't flinch. I'm legal counsel. For several parties. Corinne scoffed. Of course Island. I stood. This is a clarification meeting, I said, voice steady. People have questions, we have documents. Malcolm pulled out a chair. Then, let's clarify. Harper passed out copies of the ownership filings, title deeds, LLC structures. All properly sourced, annotated, notarized. The kind of paperwork that made eyes glaze over unless you knew what to look for. And Harper knew. She started calmly. The penthouse is legally owned by a holding company based in Georgetown, Cayman Islands. That entity in turn is linked to a trust managed by a corporate firm with no physical presence in the United States. None of the signatories from M&C Holdings appear on record. Silence. She flipped to the next page. This is the same structure used in Portland, Oregon, in Tampa, in Seattle. In each case, similar documents were presented. And in each case money was collected, projects were delayed, and no equity was ever delivered. Corinne interrupted. That is circumstantial. Malcolm nodded. We've already explained the legal complexity of cross-border investment. This kind of structure is common in international real estate. Harper slid over the next exhibit, then explained the burn footage. She pressed play on the tablet. The grainy footage of them torching documents flickered into life. Corinne paled. Gasps broke through the room. One woman stood abruptly clutching her folder. You burned records. Malcolm's voice cracked for the first time. That video is out of context. Another man. What context is there for destroying evidence? Then I spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I was your daughter. I was your contingency fund. Every time something failed, you smiled at me and asked for a little help. And I gave it. Because I wanted to believe you weren't who the world whispered you were. I turned to the group. I didn't bring you here to shame them. I brought you here to protect you. Ask for refunds. Demand answers. Or walk away. But do it with your eyes open. Corinne stood slowly. There was no rage. No apology. Only disdain. You always did think betrayal counted as virtue. She turned to the group. You're all adults. You signed your names. No one twisted your arms. Malcolm followed her but paused at the door. He looked at me not with fury but something worse. Pity. You just made it impossible to ever come home. And then they left. The room stayed quiet long after they were gone. Then questions. Legal options. Refund requests. One couple wept softly, relieved more than angry. Harper stayed behind organizing paperwork, fielding inquiries. I sat near the window staring at the city beyond. My phone buzzed. Sabrina. One new text. Hope you're proud of yourself. Mom says you ruined everything. I didn't respond, but I was proud. And I had ruined something. Their illusion. 3 days later, the first legal notice was filed. Harper helped 5 of the investors begin civil proceedings. A journalist reached out, anonymous tip, probably one of the guests. A local blog ran the headline, Trust Fund Mirage, How 2 Socialites Recycled the Same Penthouse for a Decade. It wasn't a storm yet, but the clouds were gathering. Corinne's name disappeared from the fundraiser boards. Malcolm's company website went offline. They weren't arrested. Not yet. But they were known. And for people like them, that was worse. It's strange, the things that linger after a confrontation. The silence in your inbox. The name you don't hear in conversation anymore. The lack of invitations, as if your existence had become inconvenient. But I hadn't come this far to be polite. The legal machine moved slowly, but it moved. Harper filed formal fraud complaints in 3 states. Civil suits began taking shape in Oregon, Florida, and New York. The investors we'd spoken to started organizing group emails, shared drives, sworn statements. The digital paper trail Malcolm and Corinne thought they'd buried began to surface. Harper found offshore transfers. A sequence of wire deposits from victims that eventually landed in banks registered under numbered accounts in Grand Cayman and Malta. A few transfers were routed through cryptocurrency platforms, but the patterns repeated. Same holding names, same aliases, same pitch. Harper brought in a forensic accountant, Danielle, a sharp woman with horn-rimmed glasses and no tolerance for creative bookkeeping. After just 1 week, she emailed, "This wasn't a family business. This was a franchise of fraud." What stunned me wasn't how elaborate it was. It was how lazy they'd become. Corinne used the same fonts, the same phrasing in proposals. Malcolm's sample returns documents recycled the same graphs from 10 years ago. It worked because no one expected to be lied to by people who hosted baby showers and gave handwritten holiday cards. The breakthrough came quietly. Danielle discovered a set of internal communications linked to one of the early LLCs, an email chain accidentally preserved on a server forgotten in a real estate firm's cloud storage. One message dated back to 2016 read, "Be sure the equity splits keep her under 20%. We don't want Celeste having legal standing to audit." Harper looked at me across her desk. "They never planned for you to be a partner. Not even once." I didn't cry. That well had dried. But something deeper inside me cracked. This wasn't just about theft. It was about erasure. The FBI knocked 2 weeks later. They weren't loud. No windbreakers or shouting. Just 2 quiet agents and a request to ask questions about the files Harper had submitted. I answered everything. They didn't give details. They never do. But one of them said before leaving, "You're not the first person to raise red flags, but your case is clearer, stronger." He paused. "And personal." Around that time, Sabrina went quiet online. Her Instagram disappeared. Word spread that she'd gone to Barcelona to clear her head. She hadn't reached out. Neither had Corinne or Malcolm. But others had. The retired teacher. The woman who'd lost her husband's life insurance. The friend from church. Even one of Malcolm's former business partners who admitted he'd once walked away after a bad feeling. "I always wondered," he said. "But your story confirmed it. They were playing all of us." Harper advised me to stay careful. "They're not just embarrassed, Celeste. They're exposed." I understood. Narcissists don't go down gracefully. They smear, they spin, and they don't forget. One morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. Me standing outside the courthouse talking to Harper. Someone had taken it from a distance. On the back, written in ink, "You made your choice." I filed a police report. Nothing came of it, but it told me everything I needed to know. They weren't done, but neither was I. A few weeks later, a lawyer representing another group reached out 4 more victims in Washington state. Same scheme, same names. They wanted to join the growing civil action. I connected them with Harper. She called me that night. "You're the reason this is working, Celeste. You lit the match. You made it public. People feel safe stepping forward now." I didn't feel brave, just tired. But sometimes tired people still get things done. The final blow didn't come from a court. It came from a podcast. A true crime series had picked up the case. Early buzz from social media, whispers of Ponzi tactics in high society. They interviewed Harper. They interviewed some of the victims. They played clips from Malcolm's old promotional videos, charming, poised, full of empty promises. And then halfway through episode 4, they played my voicemail. The one I'd left Harper after the gallery confrontation. My voice raw, low, exhausted. I just want it to stop, but it won't. Not until people know. It went viral within hours. Malcolm and Corinne became cautionary tales. Not in court yet, but in dinner parties. In quiet investor circles, in articles titled, "When the Devil Wears Chanel." Their names were poison. Their empire crumbled. No one trusted them anymore. And for people like them, that was worse than prison. 6 months have passed since the gallery confrontation. Not a day goes by without some echo of it, an email from a new claimant, an article forwarded by a friend, or a stranger's message simply saying, "Thank you." But in my own world, the noise has softened. The sky outside my apartment in Brooklyn looks different now. Not just because the seasons have shifted, but because I have. For the first time in years, I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop. I moved into a modest walk-up with creaky floors and a little reading nook by the window. No marble, no pretense, just light space and enough room to breathe. In April, I launched the Women Against Financial Abuse project. WAFAP. Harper named it. She said it needed a punchy acronym. I didn't argue. Every Wednesday evening, we host workshops in a borrowed community center space. Women going through divorces, single mothers dealing with coercive ex-partners, survivors of family scams just like mine. They come in broken. They leave with folders, templates, numbers to call. One of them brought cookies last week. Another offered to design our first website. Slowly, like bones knitting, something whole is forming. Harper still jokes that she didn't expect to become a nonprofit board member in her 40s. But I think she needed this as much as I did. Sometimes after a session, we stay late, just the two of us. She sips tea. I reorganize the handouts compulsively. She said, once, "If they ever go to prison, will you feel peace?" I thought about it. "No," I said, "but I'll feel finished." There were consequences, of course. Corinne and Malcolm still haven't faced formal criminal charges, but the civil suits are stacking up. 10 plaintiffs in total now across 4 states. Their assets are frozen in 2 jurisdictions. Every week brings a new deposition request. Corinne resurfaced in a tabloid photo in Lisbon sipping wine behind oversized sunglasses. The caption read, "From Upper East to Under Fire, Corinne's European Retreat." Sabrina deleted her social media. Last I heard, she was consulting for a crypto startup in Dubai. She hasn't tried to contact me again. A distant cousin forwarded me a group email they'd sent recently proposing a family reconciliation summit. No one replied. One Sunday morning, I got a voicemail from Aunt Julia. She whispered, "I always wondered, but I never wanted to believe it. You were brave." I didn't save it, but I remembered every word. Sometimes I think about the penthouse. I saw it listed online last week, marked down almost 20%. The decor still looks the same. Glass sculptures, white fur throws, a place that photographs well and holds nothing. I wonder if someone else will buy it and believe they've found permanence. I hope not. As for me, I stopped measuring success by square footage or wine labels. My apartment has mismatched chairs, a rescue cat named Olive, and a teapot that whistles too loudly. But the air here is honest. The quiet isn't empty. It's earned. Yesterday, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. "You chose truth over family." No threat this time. No signature. Just a final judgment. I folded the note and placed it into a shoebox labeled "Reminders." Not regrets. There are still scars. The way I hesitate before trusting someone new. The tension in my chest whenever I hear Corinne's voice in old memories. But there is also this: I stood up. I told the truth when it mattered. And I protected others from walking into the same soft-spoken trap I once mistook for home. Some evenings I sit by the window with a cup of chamomile olive curled up nearby, and I write. Stories, letters, sometimes just sentences. Not for revenge, for memory. Because if silence is what abusers rely on, then words, honest, clear, unsparing, are what set us free. If you're listening to this wondering whether you should speak up, wondering if you'll lose everything, let me tell you, some things are worth losing, so better things can begin. Have you ever had to choose between family and truth? I did, and I'd choose truth again.